Imagine waking up in a world where an entire chapter of human achievement has been systematically ripped out of the history books.
Not just censored, not just classified, but utterly erased, as if the people, the technology, and the terrifying breakthroughs associated with it never existed in our physical reality.
We are taught that the space race was a binary competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, a quest for the moon fueled by liquid oxygen and national pride.
But what if there was a third player, a shadow initiative that didn't aim for the stars, but for the very fabric of time and biological limits? Welcome to Chronicle Nexus. I am your guide through the labyrinth of the forgotten, and today we are descending into the deepest, darkest hole in the history of black budget operations.
Today, we talk about Project Kronos.
For decades, the name Kronos appeared only in the fever dreams of fringe theorists and the whispered deathbed confessions of disgraced physicists.
To the official record, Project Kronos does not exist. There are no declassified memos, no grainy C-SPAN hearings, and no mentions in the memoirs of Cold War generals.
Yet, if you look at the gaps in the federal budget between 1958 and 1966, the ghost billions that vanished into the Department of Defense with no paper trail, a terrifying shape begins to emerge.
We aren't just talking about a secret plane or a hidden bunker. We are talking about a project so volatile, so ethically repulsive, and so fundamentally world-altering that the powers that be decided it was safer to lobotomize our collective memory than to let the truth survive.
They didn't just burn the files, they burned the people who wrote them, but they missed a few things.
A stray transmission caught by a ham radio operator in 1962.
A series of unexplained disappearances in the Nevada desert, and a set of coordinates that lead to a place that shouldn't be there. The story of Project Kronos begins not in a laboratory, but in the chaos of post-World War II Germany.
As Operation Paperclip saw Nazi scientists being funneled into the American aerospace program, a smaller, much more secretive group was diverted away from NASA.
These weren't the rocket men like Werner von Braun. These were the occult physicists, men who had spent the war studying the diglot, or the bell,
and exploring the intersection of quantum mechanics and ancient esoteric theory. They were obsessed with the concept of temporal anchoring.
By 1953, under the Eisenhower administration, this group was sequestered in a facility known as Site 9, a subterranean complex carved into the granite of the Groom Lake Range, long before Area 51 became a household name. The mission was simple on paper, but nightmarish in practice. If the Soviets could reach the moon, the United States would reach into yesterday. They wanted the ultimate strategic advantage, the ability to see and perhaps influence the timeline itself. This was the birth of Project Kronos. But how do you erase a project of this magnitude? Here at Chronicle Nexus, we've spent months cross-referencing archival footage with lost meteorological data. In the early 1960s, there were reports of localized atmospheric distortions over the American Southwest. Pilots reported seeing cities that weren't there, or looking down at the desert and seeing oceans where there should be sand.
These were dismissed as mirages or mass hallucinations, but the truth is far more clinical. They were Kronos bleeds.
The project's lead scientist, a man whose name has been scrubbed from every university register, was allegedly a Dr. Alistair Thorne. Thorne was a protege of Oppenheimer, who suddenly died in a car accident in 1954, only to reappear in internal leaked Kronos memos as Subject Prime. Thorne believed that time wasn't a river, but a pressurized vessel. If you applied enough electromagnetic force, you could create a fistula, a hole in the present that led to a predetermined past. But Kronos wasn't just about sending a probe back to 1944. It was about the biological variable. This is where the story turns from a conspiracy into a horror movie. Documents recovered from a private estate in Switzerland belonging to a former janitor at Site 9 suggest that Project Kronos began human trials as early as 1959. They weren't using high-tech suits or titanium capsules. They were using Kronos chambers, sensory deprivation tanks flooded with ionized mercury and subjected to massive Tesla coil arrays. The volunteers, they were the unaccounted for. Soldiers who went MIA in Korea, prisoners with no family, the people society wouldn't miss. They were told they were serving their country in a high-altitude pressure test. They had no idea they were being prepared to be shredded by the gears of time. The witnesses who have dared to speak, men now in their late 80s, hiding in remote towns, described the shimmer. When the Kronos device was activated, the entire base would vibrate at a frequency that caused teeth to shatter and ears to bleed. The air would turn a bruised shade of violet, and then the silence. A silence so heavy it felt like being buried alive. One whistleblower, who we will call Vector, worked as a secondary technician on the cooling systems. He describes the day the first return happened. They had sent a subject, a young corporal, back by a mere 60 seconds. When the chamber opened, the corporal was still there. But he wasn't right. He was screaming, but there was no sound. His body was oscillating, blurred at the edges, like a photograph with a long exposure. He was physically present in 1961, but his consciousness was trapped in a recursive loop of the minute he had just lived. He aged 20 years in the span of an hour before spontaneously combusting into a pile of fine white ash. This was the first temporal casualty, but it wouldn't be the last. Instead of shutting the project down, the government doubled down. They realized that the human mind couldn't handle the transition, so they began the augmentation program. They started wiring the subjects directly into the machine, replacing parts of the frontal lobe with copper-etched processors. They were trying to create a chrono-navigator, a human being who could exist in 2 points of time simultaneously. You might be asking, if this was so successful, or even if it was a massive failure, why don't we see the scars of it today? Why did the government go to such lengths to erase Project Kronos? The answer lies in the Great Reset of 1967. Rumor has it that something went catastrophically wrong during a deep time jump. They didn't just lose a subject, they rippled the present. There are theories that our current timeline, the one you and I are living in right now, is actually the backup timeline. In 1967, Project Kronos reportedly hit a temporal wall, an event that threatened to collapse the causality of the entire Northern Hemisphere. The cover-up wasn't just a matter of filing papers away, it was a scorched earth policy. Site 9 was reportedly filled with concrete and then nuked from within to ensure nothing, no technology, no bodies, and no residual radiation could ever be analyzed. The staff were reassigned to deep cover roles or simply vanished. The Men in Black mythology that started in the late 60s, many believe those weren't agents looking for aliens, but the cleanup crew for Project Kronos, tasked with visiting anyone who had seen the violet shimmer and ensuring their silence, one way or another. As we dig deeper into the archives here at Chronicle Nexus, we find that the erasure was so thorough that even the families of the scientists were given replacement memories. Elaborate cover stories involving plane crashes or heart attacks, but you can't erase the ghost in the machine. In old NASA photos from the Gemini missions, if you look at the background noise, the static in the transmissions, some analysts claim to see the silhouette of the Kronos facility, a ghost of a building that shouldn't exist, reflecting off the atmosphere. The government thought they had buried Kronos forever. They thought that by deleting the blueprints and killing the architects, they could return the world to a linear path. But time has a way of folding back on itself. Echoes of Project Kronos are starting to resurface in modern physics labs and in the Mandela effect phenomena that plague our digital age. Was the world reset in 1967? Are we living in the aftermath of a failed experiment to conquer history itself? In the next part of this investigation, we are going to look at the Thorne journals, the supposed diary of the lead scientist that was found hidden in the wall of a condemned house in Virginia. These journals contain the terrifying blueprints of the Kronos chamber and the final, frantic warnings of a man who realized that once you open the door to time, you can never truly close it again. We will explore the connection between Kronos and the modern-day CERN experiments and ask the question, is the government trying to restart the clock? Stay tuned as we peel back the skin of reality. This is Chronicle Nexus, and the truth is never as solid as it seems. We are just getting started with the secrets of Project Kronos. The deeper we go, the more we realize that the past isn't behind us. It's waiting for us. To understand how Project Kronos transitioned from a top-secret scientific endeavor to a ghost in the machinery of history, we must first look at the year 1962. While the world was fixated on the Cuban Missile Crisis, a different kind of existential threat was brewing beneath the salt flats of the Nevada desert. Documents leaked in the late 90s, often dismissed as elaborate hoaxes, suggest that Site Theta was the birthplace of the first stable temporal rift. The technology wasn't based on the combustion engines or vacuum tubes of the era. Instead, it utilized what whistleblowers called the Kronos ring. This was a massive, underground circular accelerator, miles in circumference, designed to spin heavy ions at speeds that challenged the very laws of causality. The lead architect of this project was a man whose name has been systematically scrubbed from every academic directory, Dr. Alistair Thorne. Thorne was a protege of the greatest minds of the Manhattan Project, but his obsession wasn't with the power of the atom, it was with the malleability of the fourth dimension. According to fragmented journals allegedly recovered from a private estate in Switzerland, Thorne believed that time was not a river, but a series of interconnected rooms. If you had the right key, you could walk from one to another. Project Kronos was that key. But the government didn't just want to visit the past, they wanted to weaponize it. Imagine a world where a geopolitical blunder could be undone before it ever happened. Imagine a reality where an enemy's revolutionary technology could be uninvented by a subtle nudge in the timeline decades prior. This was the temporal superiority doctrine that fueled the bottomless black budgets of Project Kronos. However, as the experiments progressed, the scientists realized that the fabric of reality is much more fragile than they had anticipated. They began experiencing what they termed temporal bleeding. Witness reports from lower-level staff at Site Theta spoke of glitches in the gray. Men would report for duty only to find that their offices had been replaced by solid concrete walls that looked decades old. Others claimed to have seen versions of themselves walking down the opposite hallway, dressed in uniforms that wouldn't be issued for another 20 years. The most terrifying accounts involve the disappeared, personnel who weren't just killed, but were functionally deleted from existence. Their birth certificates became blank, their families forgot they ever existed, and their very names vanished from the project's payroll overnight. It was as if the universe itself was correcting an error in the code. By the mid-1970s, the bleeding became uncontrollable. The government realized that they hadn't just opened a door, they had shattered the frame. Fearing a total collapse of the local space-time continuum, Project Kronos was officially mothballed. But you don't just turn off a machine that has bent the laws of physics. You bury it. The records were incinerated. The survivors were scattered and placed under lifelong gag orders, and Site Theta was filled with millions of tons of reinforced lead and concrete.
This brings us to the modern era and the striking, some say undeniable, parallels with the European Organization for Nuclear Research, better known as CERN.
While CERN's public mission is the study of particle physics and the search for the God particle, many conspiracy researchers believe that the Large Hadron Collider is actually Project Kronos 2.0. The similarities are too glaring to ignore. The circular design, the subterranean location, and the manipulation of high-energy particles to simulate conditions that shouldn't exist in our current reality. Is it a coincidence that since the LHC went online, the world has been plagued by the Mandela effect? This phenomenon, where large groups of people remember history differently than it is recorded, is often dismissed as a quirk of human memory. But what if it's a symptom of temporal editing? If the modern government, a shadow collective that spans across borders, is using CERN to fine-tune the timeline, we would have no way of knowing. Our memories would be the only thing that might hold on to the original reality, creating that eerie sense of dissonance we've all felt when we realize a famous movie line or a brand name is wrong. Deep web whistleblowers, claiming to be former CERN technicians, have leaked data packets suggesting that the LHC has successfully replicated the Thorne-Hawking Bridge, a theoretical shortcut through time that Project Kronos first mapped in the 60s. These leaks suggest that the government isn't just trying to see the past, they are trying to fix the mistakes made during the original Kronos experiments. They are trying to re-anchor our reality to a timeline that they can control. But why the secrecy? Why erase Project Kronos if they were going to restart it anyway? The answer lies in the Omega event. In the final days of the original project, Dr. Thorne allegedly sent a transmission that was received not by his colleagues in the control room, but by a receiver in the year 2012. The message was a warning. The observer changes the observed. We have been seen. This suggests that time travel isn't a one-way mirror. When we look into the past, something looks back at us. There is a growing theory among the Kronos truthers that the government didn't erase the project because it failed, but because they succeeded too well. They encountered an intelligence, or a version of humanity from the far future, that demanded the project be hidden. This covenant of silence ensures that the masses remain oblivious to the fact that their reality is being rewritten in real time. The cover-up of Project Kronos is perhaps the most successful psychological operation in human history. They didn't just hide the documents, they made the very idea of time travel seem like the stuff of comic books and B-movies. By relegating temporal manipulation to the realm of science fiction, they created a perfect shield. If someone were to step forward today with proof of a temporal rift, the public would laugh them out of the room. This is the Amnesia Protocol in action, a multi-generational effort to ensure that we never look too closely at the clock. Yet, the cracks are beginning to show. From these strange skyquakes heard around the world to the increasing frequency of glitches in the matrix captured on consumer-grade cameras, it seems the temporal bleeding that shut down Site Theta is returning. The modern-day experiments at CERN might be pushing the envelope too far, trying to restart a clock that was never meant to be wound twice. We have to ask ourselves, if the government can erase a multi-billion-dollar project from history, what else have they deleted? Are our lives, our memories, and our very identities just variables in a cosmic spreadsheet that can be edited by a technician in a lab coat? The deeper we dig into the archives of Project Kronos, the more we realize that history is just the version of events that survived the last edit. As we move into the final part of our investigation, we will look at the chilling evidence found in the black box of Site Theta, a series of recordings that were never supposed to see the light of day. We will hear the final words of Dr. Alistair Thorne,
before he walked into the Chronos ring and vanished from every timeline.
And finally, we will reveal the ultimate goal of the modern cover-up. It's not about the past, and it's not about the future. It's about who owns now. The truth is vibrating just out of phase with our vision. If you listen closely, you can hear the hum of the machines.
The clock is ticking, but is it moving forward, or is it just circling back to the beginning? We are about to find out.
To understand why Dr. Alistair Thorne chose to step into the Chronos ring, we have to look at the last recovered data packet from the Groom Lake facility. A recording that was never meant to survive the systematic purging of the project's archives.
These are the final words of Dr. Alistair Thorne before he walked into the Chronos ring and vanished from every timeline.
And finally, we will reveal the ultimate goal of the modern cover-up. It's not about the past, and it's not about the future. It's about who owns now. The truth is vibrating just out of phase with our vision. If you listen closely, you can hear the hum of the machines. The clock is ticking, but is it moving forward, or is it just circling back to the beginning? We are about to find out. Thorne's final audio log, recovered by a whistleblower decades after the facility was filled with concrete, does not sound like the words of a madman. It sounds like the words of a man who had finally seen the blueprint of the house he was trapped in. In the recording, Thorne's voice is eerily calm against the backdrop of a high-pitched, oscillating whine. The sound of the space-time fabric being torn asunder. He said, "They think they are locking a door. They think that by erasing the blueprints and burying the lead-lined halls, they can restore the natural order." But there is no natural order left. We didn't just observe the past, we bruised it. Every time we looked back, we left a fingerprint. The government isn't trying to hide a failed experiment. They are trying to hide the fact that the original timeline is gone. We are living in the debris of the first collapse. I am going back, not to fix it, but to witness the moment before the first stitch was pulled. If you are hearing this, you are already a ghost in someone else's memory. When Thorne stepped into the ring, he didn't just disappear from the room. According to the few eyewitness accounts that weren't re-educated, he didn't even leave a shadow. The project's lead physicist simply ceased to have ever existed. Portraits of him in university hallways went blank. His name vanished from the masthead of scientific journals. The cover-up wasn't just a shredding of paper. It was a retroactive scrubbing of a human life from the collective consciousness. This brings us to the most chilling aspect of Project Chronos, the temporal scrubbing protocol. After Thorne's disappearance, the Department of Defense realized that time travel wasn't a weapon for the future, it was the ultimate tool for domestic control. If you can alter the past, you don't need to fight a war. You simply ensure your enemy was never born. You don't need to suppress a revolution. You ensure the conditions for the revolution never occurred. But why the total erasure of Project Chronos itself? Why hide the very tool of your power? The answer lies in the instability of the now. Every time the government, or whatever shadow entity currently holds the keys to the Chronos technology, makes a correction, it creates a ripple. These ripples are what we colloquially call the Mandela effect, the shifting of logos, the subtle changes in historical dates, the collective memory of events that never happened. These are the glitches in the software. The cover-up exists because if the public realized that reality was fluid, the social contract would disintegrate. Why follow laws if the lawgiver can rewrite your entire history tomorrow? Why build a life if your yesterday is subject to a committee vote? The government erased Project Chronos because they needed to maintain the illusion of a linear, unchangeable reality. They need you to believe that now is a solid, immovable point.
when in reality, it is a flickering image on a screen that they control the brightness and contrast of.
The ultimate goal of the modern cover-up is the ownership of the present moment.
By controlling the narrative of the past, they dictate the possibilities of the future. But by controlling the mechanics of time, as developed in the bowels of the Chronos facility, they own the now. They can pause, rewind, or delete sections of our reality to suit a global agenda that we aren't even allowed to perceive.
We see the evidence of this in the quiet zones scattered across the globe, places like the Green Bank Observatory.
Or certain sectors of the Nevada desert, where electronic frequencies are suppressed. These aren't just for telescopes. They are temporal dampeners, areas where the fabric of reality is being reinforced or patched.
We see it in the sudden, unexplained data migrations of government archives, where digital records are moved to servers that don't exist on any public network.
As we look at the legacy of Alistair Thorne and the ghost of Project Chronos, we are left with a haunting realization.
The machines Thorne helped build are likely still running, deep underground, in facilities that don't appear on any map. The hum continues.
The scientists today aren't trying to reach the moon or cure diseases. They are janitors of the timeline, sweeping up the anomalies and ensuring that the version of reality you woke up in today stays just consistent enough to keep you from questioning the truth.
But they can't erase everything. The human soul has a strange way of remembering the before. That sense of déjà vu you feel, that sudden cold chill when you walk into a room that feels familiar but isn't. That is your consciousness tapping into a timeline that was deleted. You are remembering a version of yourself that the government tried to scrub away.
Project Chronos was never shut down. It was simply moved behind a curtain so large we call it reality. The documents may be gone, the witnesses may be silenced, the facility may be buried under a mountain of concrete and classified labels. But the truth has a frequency, and once you know how to tune into it, the static begins to fade. We are living in the shadow of a grand experiment, a temporal chess game, where we are the pieces, and the board is constantly being redesigned. The question remains, if you could see the original timeline, would you even recognize yourself? Or has the Chronos machine rewritten you so many times that the person you are today is nothing more than a fiction scripted by a shadow government in a room without clocks? The clock is ticking. But remember, in the world of Project Chronos, the clock only tells you what they want you to believe about the time you have left. If you felt the glitches, if you've seen the seams in the sky, or if you simply know in your heart that history is more than what is written in the textbooks, then you are exactly where you need to be. These stories aren't just entertainment. They are the fragments of a truth they tried to bury. We here at Chronicle Nexus are dedicated to digging up those fragments. No matter how deep they are hidden, or how many timelines we have to cross to find them. The now might be owned by the powerful, but the truth belongs to those who dare to look for it. If this deep dive into the erasure of Project Chronos opened your eyes, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Chronicle Nexus. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a transmission from the edge of reality. Every subscriber joins a growing network of minds who refuse to let the past be rewritten in silence. Share this video with those who feel the hum, those who remember things that never happened, and those who aren't afraid of what lies behind the curtain. The more of us who watch the watchers, the harder it becomes for them to hide the seams. Thank you for joining us in the Nexus. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and most importantly, watch the clock. We'll see you in the next timeline. This is Chronicle Nexus, signing off for now.